Welcome back to Around the Clock. My next guest today is Carl Hakansson. Carl, welcome to Around the Clock.
Thank you, Elena. Nice to be here.
This is Carl's first time on the show, but I'm sure for many of our viewers, you are not unknown to them. I'm sure many people know who you are. Carl is currently a member of the Board of Selectmen, on the Conservation Committee, on the Land Stewardship Committee, and as of last night at our last meeting, you've now been appointed to the Warren Woods Ad Hoc Committee.
That's correct.
And Land Stewardship and Warren Woods Ad Hoc probably tie in together.
They do, and Land Stewardship is also a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission, so those three are really kind of interrelated.
Well, let's start at the beginning. How long have you been a resident of Ashland?
Well, I was born and raised in Ashland,
okay.
So it's been some time. I haven't lived in Ashland my entire life, but about 10 years ago, when my dad passed away, my parents had always lived in Ashland, and I moved back to allow my mom to stay in their house. And during that time, I built my own house. And so I've been back in town for the last 10 years or so.
Okay, and besides all these volunteer committees, what do you do?
Well, for work or for play? There's
a
not
little
too
bit of
much
each,
play
I guess.
these days. So,
yeah, you're keeping pretty busy. What do you do for work? What's your job?
I have two jobs. I'm an
Okay.
attorney, and I work in environmental law and land use law. And I work with Native American Indian tribes with regard to environmental and land use issues as well. And I've done that for 22 years or so.
Okay.
Before that, I was an animal behavioralist, and
wow.
but went back to law school. And I also teach at Framingham State University.
Okay,
And
but you're also a musician.
Musician as well, yeah.
So how did that all come about? Being a musician and the animal behavioralist and then going back to law school and...
Well, gee, it's a long story.
Let's condense it.
Well, I've been interested in music for most of my life. And when I was young, I was somewhat of an athlete as well. And in those days, it seemed like you were either an athlete or a musician. So it sometimes caused some issues if you were both. And so I stopped playing music to concentrate on being an athlete, but I was also kind of small, so I got beat up a lot. And so after high school, I had been a musician ever since I could remember, but then really delved deeply into playing music when I started into college.
And where did you go to college?
I went to undergraduate at Framingham State.
Okay.
And at that time, I was an environmental biology major. Okay. And so from there was the natural transition to animal behavior. And while I was working animal behavior, I started into graduate school at Northeastern. And during that time, I took a couple of environmental law classes and really kind of had this epiphany that that's what I wanted to do. So I left graduate school and applied to law school.
Wow.
And went back to law school.
And then how did it transition into your work with Native Americans and land use for them?
Well, I would like to say that had some kind of a noble connection, but one of my other hobbies is horseback riding.
Okay.
And so in the early 90s, I saw the movie Dances with Wolves, and I said, that's how to ride horses, and that's where to ride horses. And it was filmed in South Dakota, so my friend and I went out to South Dakota to spend some time trying to find a place to ride a horse on the plains.
Wow.
And I'd always been interested in the horse cultures, in Indian cultures. So while I was there, I met some people that introduced me that worked with the tribes in South Dakota. And I started to become immersed in the law as it applies to Native Americans, which is very different. And one thing led to another. I just applied my knowledge and skills as a land use attorney to their specific interests.
Okay.
And if you're not involved in gaming, there's not a whole lot of money in doing that type of thing. So there wasn't a whole lot of competition. So I was able to kind of rise up through the ranks relatively quickly with regard to doing that because there aren't a whole lot of people that were that committed to it.
And now that, so you were out in South Dakota doing that kind of work, you came back to Massachusetts. Are you still involved in that kind of work?
I am. Mhm.
Okay.
But it's expanded. You know, in those days, you almost had to be on site all the time
Right.
to get things done. But the world has changed so much because of technology and because I now have a network of people that I can work with, that you can do a lot of it not on site. And
Right,
so,
right. And let's talk a little bit about all the committees you're on here in Ashland. What got you first started? What was the first committee? And
well, I guess what got me involved in Ashland politics was Warren Woods. You know,
Okay.
and I wasn't on any committee during that time. I had known at that time. I was back staying with my mother, and our family had known the Warrens, and it's kind of like the last section of Ashland that still looks like Ashland used to look
Right.
when my sisters and I grew up, and. So I got involved in that, and one thing led to another. I was solely involved in just the Warren Woods preservation without being on any committee.
Right.
And once that was settled, I was asked if I would be interested in being a part of the Conservation Commission, because the Conservation Commission was playing such an important role in the stewardship
Right.
of Warren Woods. And so I said yes, and then the Stewardship Committee was created there. And the run for Board of Selectmen, I'm not sure where that came from, to tell you the truth. I'm not sure where that came, other than the fact that there were, and there still are, I think that Ashland is really at a turning point with regard to a lot of things. And I thought I had a unique perspective, the fact that I had grown up here, and my mother had grown up here, and my grandfather had grown up here,
Right.
and so our family roots run deep here. And I feel like I have a lot of old friends here, a lot of new friends here, so I was able to bring what I thought was a unique perspective to a lot of the issues, not just to the land issues.
and how do you feel your year is going as a member of the board?
Well, I've always had an appreciation for the amount of time that these volunteer positions take up, but I have a new appreciation for the amount of time that you have to put in to be an effective member of the Board of
Right,
Selectmen.
right.
And so it's been very tiring for me because I work 2 jobs and I'm on several different committees, and I'm still trying to have a life.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's something that you can maybe do easier when you're 35 than when you're my age. So it's been tiring, but most of the time it's been rewarding, and sometimes it's been frustrating, but that comes with the territory.
Right, right. So your term is up at the end of May. Have you considered yet if you'll run again?
You know, I haven't made up my mind.
Right. I mean,
I've
you still have some
considered it.
time.
It's just there have been so many things going on just in town.
Right.
With the override discussions and the myriad of things that
Right.
are ongoing
and all the
in town.
projects and development.
That
and
just trying to stay up to date on things has been a challenge for me, and to get up to date on things that I really wasn't
involved with before. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's you know, I guess sooner or later I'll have to make up my mind, but I haven't really thought about it.
Right.
It's other people seem to bring it up to me more than I bring it up to myself.
Right. And that you'll get that. You'll get that. People are like, oh, you know, especially, you know, it's one of those things that if people like what you're doing, they want you to stay. And if they don't like what you're doing, they'll
They
say,
want you.
never
Yeah.
mind. Good. So before we wrap up, I have one question, and I ask this question of all new guests on the show. It's not that hard, so don't worry.
Okay.
The question is there something about you, Carl Hakansson, that not many people may know that you'd be willing to share with our viewers?
That not many people know. Boy, that's a tough one. You know, I guess I can't say that not many people know this. A lot of people that know me from the political fields don't know that I'm a musician. And that's something that's really it's been a common thread for me for my entire life. I guess the other thing is that some people may not know is that my family roots go back so far, and that my
Yeah.
grandfather, who I never met because he died relatively young, was a selectman in town for close to 20 years in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, that's cool when you brought that information to one of our meetings and
And the funny
shared
thing-
that with us.
the funny thing
was
about
very interesting.
That my grandfather is I never met him. He passed away 14 or 15 years before. He passed away before any of us were born.
Yeah.
But he was so alive in the stories of my mother. So as long as, and my mother's been gone now for a few years, but she lived to be 90 years old. And she was a great storyteller of Ashland. And just this morning I was talking with Mrs. Briasco, who owns the Organ Club.
Okay.
And she said, you know, are you the same Hakansson family? And then we just went down that road, you know, that my dad knew her husband, and then her husband went to school with my mother, and it was just, you know, it makes it feel like such a village still when those type of things happen.
And for me, as someone, my parents were, you know, immigrants. They came over from Belgium. I'm first generation American. My parents moved around a fair amount when I was younger. So it's interesting to me to hear those stories of people who their parents, their grandparents have stayed in one place. But what I think is interesting about Ashland is, for me and my husband, we've been in town for, it's over 25 years. But because there are people who have been here that long, we feel like we have become real citizens and community members of Ashland, because people who have been here for so long have been very welcoming and open to say, we might have been here this long, but we are open to people who haven't been here as long. And I think that's part of what makes Ashland very unique, is that mix of people who have that history and whose family has been here, as well as those of us who haven't been here as long but want to make Ashland our home, and so that our children can have some of the things that you have.
It's kind of fun to share that. You know, my mother's roots are deep here, but my dad was an immigrant. He came from Sweden.
Okay.
But, you know, it's fun. When I got involved in Warren Woods, I hadn't been involved in anything politically or work-wise in Ashland, kind of by design. And so obviously a lot of people had moved in that I didn't know.
Right.
And in the political hierarchy were a lot of people that I didn't know. And conversely, I've met so many people that have moved to Ashland and have made Ashland their home and love Ashland, and that actually like hearing some of those stories.
Yeah,
You know, because sometimes, you know, for people that have lived here for a while, they just kind of roll your eyes when you start telling those stories. But you know, it's what makes a little town, is to have those stories. You know, we spoke earlier about the little controversy between Joe Magnani and myself that runs back 50 years, except it seems like it was yesterday.
Right. And we will have both of you on the show in the near future to share that story.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for being on Around the Clock.
Well, thank you for having me.
Stay with us, and we'll be back with more Around the Clock.